Okay, let's dive right into this. I want you to picture this scenario. You're sitting in a dimly lit boardroom. You've literally spent weeks agonizing over this career-defining presentation, right? You've gathered all the data, built the absolute perfect frameworks, and anticipated every single possible edge case. You deliver the pitch flawlessly, and then silence. The executives are just quiet. But you feel like you totally nailed it. But then, a senior board member named Marcus looks down at your beautifully crafted memo, totally ignores his coffee, and asks this one devastating question. That was a beautiful analysis. What do you think we should do? Now, this is a true story from the author of our source material today. He honestly thought he had completely mastered strategic clarity. He had the 5 whys, the 3x3 grids, the perfectly structured options. But when Marcus asked him what he actually thought they should do, he completely froze. He just started nervously repeating the trade-offs until Marcus just cut him off, asking if he was going to make a call or if someone else had to do it for him. And this brilliantly illustrates the exact moment our author realized a pretty terrifying truth about his own career. A truth that Marcus actually laid out for him over a tough-love coffee chat a few days later. You see, the skill of making chaos legible, producing options, structuring all that ambiguity, it's fantastic, but it has a ceiling. It safely gets you to mid-management, sure, but stepping into the shoes of the actual decision-maker, that is where the real magic happens. The higher up you go, the less your job is to perfectly structure decisions, and the more your job is to actually make them. True leadership is just a completely different ballgame. Now, think about the word commoditize for a second, especially in the context of a reality today. Because here is the genuinely terrifying truth about the modern professional landscape heading into 2026. Artificial intelligence can now do all that structuring work flawlessly. It can whip up a highly competent memo in literally 30 seconds. It can summarize trade-offs, find the edge cases, the whole shebang. So what does this all mean? It means the analysis premium, getting paid to be the smartest person who can neatly organize a complex problem, is dead. It is now a highly commoditized skill. So why do we do this? Why do we naturally default to this safe, cozy zone, just hiding behind hedged analysis? Well, because our entire education and corporate culture practically trained us to. Think about it. School rewarded us for showing our work. Universities praised us for perfectly citing sources. And, let's be real, corporate culture often severely punishes making the wrong call. So, we learn to hedge, we learn to constantly say, well, it depends. But in an age of AI, relying on that thoroughness makes you entirely replaceable by a machine. The absolute only premium value left is having the guts to put your name on a call. Which brings us right to the absolute core concept of this entire explainer, the conviction gap. Is this massive chasm between the people who simply structure the problems and the people who actually step up and decide them. Closing this gap means realizing that true leadership isn't about having all the answers or, just being the loudest voice in the room. It's about making the call and having real skin in the game. It's about deeply caring about the consequences of being wrong. And frankly, that is the one thing artificial intelligence absolutely cannot do. Let's look at this brilliant insight from Marcus, the board member. He pointed out something absolutely crucial. The most expensive thing a senior person can do is refuse to make a call. The second most expensive thing, making the wrong call. But here's the kicker. Those two are not equally expensive. Companies can and do recover from bad decisions all the time, but they literally cannot recover from a paralyzing lack of direction. This is exactly why executives get paid the big bucks. Not because they magically possess perfect data, but because they bridge that gap and keep the whole organization moving forward. So the crucial point is the 70% rule. Look, by the time you've gathered 95% of the information you want, the decision window has almost certainly completely closed. The world has already moved on without you. Waiting for that last 30% of data is just an asymptotic trap. It takes massive effort for basically zero extra clarity. And let's be totally honest with ourselves here. We usually just use it as a convenient excuse to avoid taking responsibility. True leaders, they make the call at 70%. All right, so how do we stop being analysts and start being leaders? You don't just wake up one morning with unwavering executive presence. You have to train for it. Which brings us to Section 1, 3 reps to conviction. Let's jump right into this actionable training manual to help you close this gap over the next 90 days. We are going to look at 3 very specific, maybe slightly uncomfortable, but entirely life-changing daily habits. First step, putting a stake in the ground. Second, using the even-if clause. And third, practicing pre-mortem ownership. Mastering these 3 steps will permanently separate you from that giant pool of highly replaceable middle managers. Let's kick things off with Rep 1. Replace "it depends" with a stake in the ground. The very next time you are asked a strategic question, do not, and I mean do not, start your answer with, "well, it depends." Uttering those words is basically running a 30-second commercial for your own replaceability. It literally turns you into a vending machine for analyses, just spitting out endless pros and cons while forcing someone else to do the actual hard work of choosing. Let's see this in action with a sales spend example. A typical super safe response sounds kind of like this. "Well, it depends on customer acquisition cost and bandwidth. I can put together a really nice comparison." Very analytical, sure, very safe. But a true partner-level response sounds like this. "No, we have a leaky bucket. Put the budget into retention." Boom, right? That is the voice of a leader. You take a firm stand, you name the underlying problem, and, this is crucial, you explicitly name what data would actually change your mind. It proves you've thought deeply about the actual problem, not just played around with the parameters. Now, you might be wondering, how on earth can I take a firm stake in the ground when I only have 70% of the information? Won't I just sound completely unsure? That is exactly where Rep 2 comes in, the even-if clause. This is just a brilliant verbal sleight of hand. It lets you project 90% confidence even when you only have that 70% of the data. Let's move to and see how this builds into a highly effective verbal structure. First, you state your recommendation flat out. Second, you say, "even if the worst plausible downside happens, I still recommend this because," and third, "the only scenario where I'd flip my position is." What you are doing here is publicly stress testing your own recommendation. You're loudly signaling to leadership that, "hey, I have already considered the downsides, and I am fully ready to own them." Let's look at a product launch example to really hammer this home. A classic hedge sounds something like, "we should launch in Q2 assuming everything goes perfectly with engineering and marketing." You know what that does? All that does is pre-distribute blame, so you have a convenient exit strategy if things go off the rails. But a real leader's response? It says, "launch in Q2. Even if the customer interviews are lukewarm, we still lock in our market positioning." You are explicitly absorbing the risk right there. You're proving you aren't leaving yourself a cowardly exit. You are the one actively moving the business forward. And this brings us to Rep 3, the final and definitely most powerful habit. It's actually drawn from cognitive psychologist Gary Klein, the pre-mortem ownership. Here's how it works. Before you even commit to a decision, you literally force yourself to imagine that it has already failed. You look at it and ask, okay, if this completely blows up in our faces in 6 months, what is the most likely reason? Now, you might think that ending your big recommendation with a terrifying list of ways it could all fail would instantly scare leadership and totally kill your project. But actually, scratch that. Claiming that risk up front does the exact opposite. It signals that you've thought harder about this than anyone else in the room. It signals that you are personally absorbing the risk. And most importantly, it signals that you are the one who is going to be actively watching for these failure modes, which means leadership doesn't have to worry about it. You're giving them absolute peace of mind by actively owning the danger. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that this exact script actually earned our author a VP promotion in just 6 weeks. This is a real-world VP sales hiring pre-mortem. Instead of just vaguely saying, "let's hire her, she's great," he broke down exactly how the hire could fail: cultural fit, velocity drag, trust failure. For every single scenario, he identified a specific, measurable warning signal and exactly what action he'd take if he saw it. I mean, this isn't the voice of an analyst just tossing a resume over the fence. This is the voice of a true executive actively managing organizational risk. So we've covered the reps, but that brings us to section 2, the price of leadership. Because look, once you finally step out from behind the safety of your endless spreadsheets and your cozy "it depends" hedging, things get very real, very fast. The stark, undeniable reality is this: AI cannot commit. Conviction is existential. We really have to reiterate this point. An AI can give you brilliant, perfectly structured strategic options, for sure. But an AI cannot be embarrassed. It cannot lose status among its peers. It doesn't get fired, and it definitely doesn't worry about paying its mortgage. And that is precisely why human courage is the absolute only premium left in white-collar work. You are literally getting paid for your willingness to put your neck on the line. Which brings us to a quote that should completely change how you view your own career missteps. Taking a strong stance guarantees that eventually you are going to be wrong in public. And yeah, people will absolutely take notes while you're wrong, but accumulating those scars, that is the mandatory toll for leadership. Every single great leader has a long, painful list of bad calls. The list is the credential. The scars are the certification. You just cannot bypass this part of the journey.
We are basically facing a binary choice in the modern economy. You can stay comfortably in the middle, hiding behind your frameworks, constantly striving to be the absolute smartest person in the room who never ever makes a mistake. Or you can be the one who steps up, absorbs the risk, and actually decides. And let me tell you, as AI continues to evolve at lightning speed, the job market is only going to aggressively pay for one of those.
So I want to leave you with this final, genuinely vital question to ask yourself the very next time you walk into a meeting. Take a hard look at the work you're producing. Look at the answers you're giving. Are you truly acting as a leader who takes a stand and owns the outcome? Or have you allowed yourself to become just a vending machine for analysis? Really think about it, because the choice of which path you take next, it's entirely yours.